Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 13 work session of the Ann Arbor City Council, where we will discuss issues of community sustainability. Dr. Stoltz, it's all yours.
Great. Well, first and foremost, I just want to thank you, Mayor Taylor and City Council, for creating space for this conversation to happen. It is probably going without saying that I enjoy this topic quite a lot, and so I'm excited to spend the next little bit of time talking to you about it. For today, we've really broken down the presentation into 4 different sections. The first is we have a speaker to talk kind of about the state of the science, and that's just because the world is moving very, very fast, and we're lucky enough to have some global authorities here who can actually give us that overview. And then I'm going to translate a little bit of that to what it means here in Ann Arbor, where they're going to then follow that up with a look at where we've been, right? Because we're actually pretty fortunate to have an outstanding community that's been doing this work for a long time. So I want to acknowledge that and then tell you a little bit about what we've been working on in the office for 10 months, because we've only existed for about 10 months, and I've been here a little less than that. And then we're going to transition to where we're going. And I have a few fun things to share with you when we get to that point, so I hope you're excited. And then we'll end, obviously, with questions, thoughts, ideas, because everything is iterative. Any heartbreak with that before we jump in? Heartbreak, all right.
Not heartbreak. I'm just wondering what the time commitment is for your presentation.
Oh, what a good question. So I was told we had this whole session for it, and I have a sense we can go faster if we need to. Would you like us to go faster?
Faster would be good. I prefer an adequate opportunity for questions.
And is it the preference of the body that we do questions at the end?
I think we tend to put questions at the end. If there's something burning, then people step in, but for the most part, we tend to do that. But
Sure. Can I make a suggestion that maybe since the sections are discrete, we can take kind of questions at the sections if they're relevant?
we certainly can.
Okay, just because I want to respect in case there's a question for our first speaker.
Absolutely.
We can then let him transition. Okay, with that, so the very first section that we're going to talk about is the state of the science. And I am really, really honored to introduce Dr. Jonathan Overpeck, who's the Dean for the School of the Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. He's affectionately known as Peck. He is a member of the Nobel Peace Prize winning team that developed the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the scientific work that comes out of that really is the authoritative body on climate change, both the science, the impacts, and what we can do about it. He also raised his hand very graciously to serve on our city's environmental commission, so as our newest commissioner. So with that, please join me in welcoming Peck. You are up, sir.
Thanks, Missy.
You're welcome.
And I'm guessing you're all looking at a screen.
Yes.
You have eyes in the back of your heads. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm new to Ann Arbor as of almost 2 years ago. I did spend a good part of my youth in Jackson in the Detroit metropolitan area. I did go to football games here in Ann Arbor, but I had only dim memories of that. And I married into a Michigan family, so I've been coming here for now about over 30 years in the summers up north. So it's really nice, I think, when our family moved here from Arizona and Colorado, where we lived for about 30 years, back into the heartland. And we're really enjoying all the water. But water's not all good, as we'll point out in my presentation. I'm going to try and go fast, so there is time for questions. I'm really here to talk about, first, that there's a climate opportunity here. And by that, I mean an opportunity relative to the rest of the country with respect to climate change. But I also am trying to convey that if we allow climate change to go too far, we too will be sort of in the danger zone in terms of quality of life and economic well-being here in the state. And what we could do in the meantime, though, if we handle this right, I think, is make Michigan a go-to place for the nation. And I had that in mind when I first engaged President Mark Slissel at the University of Michigan on what we needed to do with respect to climate. And we talked a lot about how behind the scenes, or behind the rest of the pack Michigan was with respect to its own policies towards climate neutrality or carbon neutrality. And that if we just said we're going to go carbon neutral, there are too many other universities that are already doing that. And I noticed that Michigan had a little bit of, I don't know, they think they're pretty good. And so I wanted to come up with something better. And we agreed that most people don't realize it, but his initiative to go carbon neutral includes also, let's push and help the state and the region and the nation go carbon neutral as well, and do it as equal partners. So we're really trying to shift how the University of Michigan works with partners. And as you'll see, I hope there's some big things we could do together. All right, everyone knows about global warming. And I like to show this map to start it, just to show why it's called global warming. All the colors on here are where it's warming, all the yellow through reds. And if it's gray, it means we don't have thermometers back to 1880, but the rest of the world has been warming since then with a few exceptions, and that's why it's called global warming. Interesting enough, the last 5 years have also been the warmest 5 years. So all the records, top 5 years are all in the last 5 years. So it's definitely toasty. Here's where I come from. There was water there, but it's usually behind big dams. And the two largest dams on the Colorado River, damming up Lake Mead and Lake Powell, both of these lakes now, the largest impounded lakes in the nation, are way less than half full. Because the Southwest has been in a drought since 1999, and there's been a slow, steady reduction in the flow of the Colorado River since really the time it was allocated in the 1920s. And the reason for that is primarily because of the warming. So in a sense, the only sustainable water supply for about 40 to 50 million people in the Southwest, and this includes places like LA and San Diego, Vegas, Salt Lake City, Phoenix, Tucson, Albuquerque, Denver, a lot of cities you've heard of. The only sustainable water for this region is drying up because of the warming. Not good. Meanwhile, over on the Atlantic and Gulf Coast, this didn't translate so well, but we have sea level rise occurring. All of the things I'm talking about are already going on. And the colors on this map just show you the extent of land that will be submerged if we allow sea level rise, climate warming, caused by climate warming to go unchecked. And then just to give you a sense of how much sea level rise, the US Navy, who really has a responsibility not to screw up, is planning on as much as 2 meters or 6 feet by the end of this century of sea level rise. Scientists don't think it'll be that much, but it is possible. And that's coming from a warming ocean. As it warms, it expands. That raises sea level. And also big ice sheets are now starting to melt, and that turns into sea level rise. Here's a study that doesn't include the water problems in the Southwest. It doesn't include the sea level rise along the Gulf and Atlantic coast, or the Pacific coast for that matter. A little more mountainous there, so it's not as big a deal. But this study looked at just a number of other factors that would be affected by warming and tried to translate that using pretty well-established economics and science into how the gross domestic product would be affected by continued warming. And the big take-home here is that the red areas are places that are going to lose. They're going to have less vigorous economy because of climate change in this century. They're places where those who loan money for municipal bonds, for example, those who track housing, they're starting to look at these regions as real problematic regions. But they're, lo and behold, they're green regions as well, including Michigan. And there's a little color in Michigan because agriculture just about everywhere is going to be affected in a negative way by climate change. But nonetheless, we look like relative winners, and that's a big deal. So there's climate opportunity for the Great Lakes, because I think there are going to be a lot more people like myself and my wife, who's also a climate scientist at the U of M, who are going to think, living in the Southwest is a bit risky. We got all our retirement invested in a home, and that home value could start to go down once we hit a shortage on the Colorado River, which we're really close to. We would have probably hit it this year if it hadn't been for this amazing snow year we've got this year. And so it's just a matter of time, I think, before people are going to start, and companies and talent are going to start thinking there's other places to go. Combine that with what I've shown you in other parts of the southern tier, and factor in that for example, a lot of my alums that I've started to meet at the University of Michigan are in places like Silicon Valley and Boston and New York and DC area where, yeah, life is good, jobs are well paying, but they're starting to have families. They realize they cannot afford to live in these places. So another thing that we've got going for us is we're affordable relative to some of the other parts of the country that are currently booming. But the big thing is, this is a cooler part of the world. Not just cool because we live in Ann Arbor, but cool because it's climatically cool. And as the rest of the country really gets unbearably hot, and I tell you, go out to Tucson in late June, or go to Phoenix if you want to feel your shoes sink into the asphalt, or go down in, you know, the southern tier where you just want to feel humidity like we have here, only a whole lot worse. A lot of those people are going to start looking here. We have the water. 20% of the world's unfrozen water is here in the Great Lakes. Now, that's a mistake to think all that water is available for use, because obviously we don't want to have a bunch of drained lakes. But a sizable amount of water in this region available for our use. But what happens if we let climate change go too far? It becomes a challenge for our region. So we have to hit that sweet spot where we can be a go-to place, and this is what I want to do in partnership in Michigan and the Great Lakes region, and with our colleagues at the University of Michigan and other universities. It's got to be all hands on deck, is to create a real opportunity for this region in the heartland of the United States where we can grow and be the new go-to place economically. But we got some interesting changes happening with our climate. The map on the left shows sort of how the average precipitation has changed over the last 100 or so years. Well, last 30 years, actually, relative to the longer average. And you can see the blue colors are where the average precipitation is going up. So it's getting wetter here, and probably everyone knows that. Everyone's seen the Great Lakes this year, sort of full to the brim kind of thing. And floods, houses being flooded out on the St. Lawrence and in Canada. The map on the right shows how the most intense precipitation has been changing. And what happens is the atmosphere warms up, it can hold more moisture. So we can actually measure that with satellites or aircraft. It's happening. And that means when it rains, it tends to rain much harder, more rain per hour, more rain per minute. And you can see those numbers that are in black circles, 42% increase in intense precipitation. The heaviest 1% of the rain has gone up by 42% in that large dark blue area. So this is where in the United States, it's getting wetter, and it's getting a lot wetter. And you can see the effects of that this year with flooding down in Texas, and Louisiana, all the way up the Mississippi, out of the high plains, in Michigan, in Detroit. This is what climate change looks like to our part of the world. And our infrastructure, obviously, is being overwhelmed. But this flooding does something else that's really important. There are a number of bipartisan things. In the Southwest, I always was able to talk to just about anyone across the aisle because water was bipartisan. So everyone wanted to ensure water supply, and they just sort of put aside our worldviews to talk about water just about anywhere. And born out of respect, we work on water down there. Well, up here, it turns out, I've sort of noticed all my life that people really value the Great Lakes across the aisle. They value good paying jobs. They value good drinking water. Well, with all of this new water coming to this part of the world in form of rain and more intense rain, that means more runoff from agriculture. And that's 1/2 of what you need to really get these algal plumes booming, not just in Lake Erie, but eventually all the Great Lakes. The other thing you need are warmer temperatures, and lo and behold, we're going to get that too. So if we let this go unchecked, and so far we haven't been able to figure out how to stop the blooms, we got a big problem, and that all the lakes, including even Lake Superior, are going to start to see this kind of problem. And that is something I don't think anyone living in Michigan or the Great Lakes wants to see. Paradoxically, as we're getting all of this rain, because the atmosphere can hold more rain, it means we're going to get more days without rain on average. And we're not really seeing that since I moved here. But we should be getting, because of the warming and because of the moisture holding capacity of the atmosphere, we should start to see a trend towards longer dry spells. What does that mean? That means we're going to have to irrigate our agriculture more. You can already see that expanding in southwest Michigan. It means we're going to see shorter but nonetheless severe droughts because it's so darn hot. When it doesn't rain, some of our fruit production and other agriculture production will be stressed. This will also affect ecosystems, and it's just a matter of time, like the western United States, we'll start to see our forests die and have problems because the trees that we have growing now in Michigan are all trees that were essentially established back when it was cooler. And as it continues to get warmer, these trees will be more and more out of equilibrium with their environment. And that will weaken the trees, and at some point we'll start to see an uptick in wildfire in the Great Lakes region as well. What does this mean for the Great Lakes? I'm almost done here. Obviously, it means we could rapidly become a desired place to live and do business. We, of course, have to figure out not just how to provide good Great Lakes, recreation, tourism, but we got to also have clean water. We got to have good education. We got to think about how we're going to attract talent to Michigan. Get that number of people that we're all moving out of Michigan to get them to move back here, and hopefully be the kind of people who are going to drive a much more sustainable in the long-term economy. All right? This is going to require renewable energy, because if we don't get into renewable energy, the talent we want, the young talent, won't be as interested in here. They'll be moving to California, they'll be moving to the East Coast, where they're taking that challenge seriously. But moreover, they'll realize that we're not preparing for the future of climate change. So we really need to be able to embrace renewable energy in the state and move much more quickly out of fossil fuels. Okay? The good news here is that the cost of renewable energy is plummeting fast. At the University of Michigan, where Missy and I are on the President's Commission for Carbon Neutrality, I'm pretty sure, and I'm a dean, so I have to pay attention to the money, that we will save money in the long term by going to renewable energy. We're already at the point where wind is cheaper than gas, and solar will be soon, and battery storage will also be at a cost that makes it all more affordable than fossil fuels sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, probably in the next 5. All right? It's a global market that is driving down the price of technology, just like the global market has driven down the price of these huge TVs, of your phones, of your computers, of so much we do. It's totally unlike the commodities of oil and gas, which will just continue to fluctuate. And who knows, a war here, a war there, the price could go up. With tech, the price just goes down. All right? So we need to get it done. And I can say here that we're very eager at the University of Michigan to work with Ann Arbor, to work with Washtenaw, to work with other communities around Michigan to make it happen. Obviously, we can't do it all by ourselves, but I think if we work together, it becomes more cost effective. And some of this isn't just getting the renewable energy that we produce or the renewable energy that we purchase, but it's also tackling problems like mobility and figuring out the mess that is our region when it comes to commuting, when it comes to just getting around. And can we do that and do it in a carbon neutral way? If we can't, nobody can do it. We have the best mobility, science, and engineering and policy in the world within, like 20 clicks of right where we're all sitting and standing. So if we can't figure this out with our partners here in Michigan, no one's going to figure it out. Although I do worry, China is trying very hard to beat us to the punch and command that market, which will be a global market. Electrified transportation, from cars to trucks to buses to trains to short hop aircraft, everything will be powered by electricity. And that will all be in our lifetime, including people like me with gray hair. Okay, so that's it. That's my presentation. I'm happy to take any kind of questions about climate or what we need to get out of this or how we might work together.
One of my conflicts is we talk about long-range plans. And I live in a passive solar house. I drive an electric vehicle. I've dug a trench around my property for the water that's coming with the heavy rain. But as a council member, I also have to balance many other needs. And one of the things that I hear is we have terrible air quality in Ann Arbor. And how do we work towards greater sustainability and also improve our air quality now? And we have to accept the fact that people are not going to get out of their automobiles short-term, and adding congestion to punish them to get out of their vehicles simply decreases the quality of our air. So how do we balance all of that? And is there a role for the sustainability movement to address that?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I have asthma. And one of the things I was surprised about when I moved to Michigan were the number of bad air alerts that occur here. It's tropospheric ozone, smog, and it's produced because of the burning of fossil fuels. And one of the things that is most interesting, I sit on a number of National Academy of Sciences boards, and one of them we had a session talking about methane, which is natural gas. And one of the things we've learned about natural gas is it's a lot less friendly to the atmosphere, both in terms of carbon and climate change and air quality than we first thought. We thought it was a bridge from coal to renewable energy. And it is a bridge in the sense that it's cheaper than coal, but it probably isn't going to be cheaper than renewables very long. But one of the real nasty things I learned is that methane, and it's a lot of, when they produce methane, you get leakage at the wellhead, you get leakage along the way, fugitive emissions, we call it. And that stuff is the worst for smog. And if we continue to go all out on natural gas for the next 20, 30, 40 years, like some folks down in oil and gas country think we will, we'll end up with air quality in this nation that's pretty much the same as before the Clean Air Act, because it's so bad. So clearly what I'm saying is we got to get out of natural gas and fossil fuels as soon as we can. The other probably bigger source in Washtenaw County and around where we live is just from car exhaust. So it's burning the other kind of gas, petroleum. And that's why I really look forward to an electrification of our transportation. And I think we need to work together to figure out how, not to punish people, but to incentivize. You know, my whole shtick when it comes to climate change and sustainability is we should live a better life. We shouldn't have to live a life that's less than what we had before. But it means being smarter and hopefully using economies of scale to get people to do things that are better for their health in this case. And I think you'll start to see, I mean, you obviously are starting to see the plummeting of electrified cars, EVs. Now you can buy at sort of at the more luxury level, the BMW level, it's pretty much cost parity with EVs. And it won't be long, and that wasn't the case just a couple of years ago. So it won't be long before the less expensive vehicles that more of us can afford will also be, it's the same price as buying a gas car. Of course, many of us can't afford to get rid of our cars until we got like hundreds of thousands of miles on them. But nonetheless, the faster we can incentivize that, you know, I love the parking lot underneath the library because I can plug my car in. There are not a lot of places I can have a dependable plug my car in this town. We got to change that. We got to change that on campus. It's even worse. So to answer your question, let's work together and incentivize it.
Councilor Nelson.
Well, first I have to say that I totally agree about the library lot. Excellent access to plugins. I was trying to understand some of your points about the attraction of the region based on climate changes and this being a potential boon, because I feel like some of what I have read or heard about where we are positioned, where Michigan is situated, that this was potentially, I don't want to say a negative, but the idea that our climate might be more desirable was something that we almost needed to brace for. And I at some points in your presentation, I was getting the sense that you were suggesting that we would want to encourage that, or that this is something that we're striving to achieve. I guess I'm trying to understand where we fit in as city council, because I certainly, I mean, we're focusing on Ann Arbor specifically, it's hard for me to look ahead and think about what role I play in attracting people to Michigan or even maintaining that as a goal. I guess I'm sort of curious to hear you flesh out your thinking about that in terms of population growth or what that looks like long-term as a positive or negative or, yeah, I guess that was I don't know if that's even a question.
No, you got some interesting things in there that allow me to sort of get a little more into depth. One of the things from a climate science point of view that's really important to realize is that there's inertia in the climate system. Over 90% of the heat that's trapped by greenhouse gases goes into the ocean. And thank God for that, because otherwise we'd be a hell of a lot hotter. But that means that once we stabilize our temperature, our emissions of greenhouse gases, the atmosphere is likely to get warmer. And so we're going to warm up, I think, no matter what we do, another half a degree or 1 degree Fahrenheit. So we'll be pushing the envelope in terms of what's good for Michigan. I'd say in terms of rainfall intensity, we're already pushing the envelope because of our old infrastructure. We should probably fix infrastructure anyhow, but it could get overwhelmed. But the rest of the country, big swath, like the whole southern tier and along the coasts, the situation's going to be a lot worse there. Sea level rise, even if we stopped climate change now, would probably double or triple, maybe more. We don't know how much more because the ice in Antarctica takes a long time to turn into sea level rise, and it could be quite a bit more. But people are going to be retreating from the coastlines. Where are they going to go? And I can tell you, living in this, being in the Southwest in summer now is pretty much unbearable, even for someone who can afford air conditioning and everything. So I think people are going to want to move here. Why should Ann Arbor care about this? We already have enough people, you might argue. But I'm sort of thinking I'd like to live in a state that is really economically hopping along, that isn't at the teeter point between are we going to start to crash again and have economic difficulty in the rest of the state that would impinge on us, whether it's our education, our ability to fix roads, or ability to clean up all the water problems we have, water quality problems we have. Think of all the things that we need a better tax base to fix, the poor urban areas in this state. We could fix all of that if we had a bigger population in Michigan. I'm not talking about doubling the population or anything like that, but what if we bring in enough talent to really build a much sort of an economy that rivals what's in Silicon Valley or in Boston? Or in DC or New York area. That's what we're talking about. The difference being, if you live here, you can afford a house, still get a good paying job, have amazing recreational opportunities, not far away, just a couple hours. Like, I don't know about everyone in this room, but sitting on the Great Lake is one of the best things I can think of doing, and I've lived all over the planet and worked all over the planet. So that's what I'm talking about. I don't know if that helps. But we could attract talent here that would allow us to, and entrepreneurs and capital, that would allow the economy here to boom in a way that it won't bust, somewhere down the way. So I lived here as a kid right before '66. That's when we moved out. And, I can still remember the stories and the news. And, of course, when I come back, starting, about 35 years ago when I married into this family from Michigan, people are scarred here from that economic decline and malaise that took place. Here we have an opportunity to show the world how to build a sustainable economy that includes a sustainable environment and justice. How do you do it right this time? And that's what I think we should try. What do we get for that? Hopefully we clean up all the messes we've got and build our new infrastructure and have our cake and eat it too. But if we don't do it, solve climate change, we too will suffer. And then I don't know what happens. I think we really got to get moving on climate change. It is the biggest threat humankind has ever known.
Yes, I'm just going to jump in. Do you have a question?
I do not. I have one more question in the queue, but
I just want to jump in on that point, though, and say one of the things that we are looking at, and you'll see, is we've won a small grant to figure out what migration in the region could even look like, because no one really knows. And so whether or not it's good or bad is a discussion that we can have, but if we don't even have a sense for what might be coming, we can't plan for that. So it is one of the things that we are talking a lot about, is to understand, as people are fleeing areas at risk, what might we receive? Because we are pretty attractive. So we're hoping to come back to council with some ideas. We've got a climate demographer that we're trying to work with to look at that, because what we're looking at is true throughout the entire Great Lakes region. So I just wanted to let you know. And then, Councilmember Griswold, to your question, the other thing that we're looking at too, green infrastructure, right? Trees absorb pollutants and criteria, air pollutants in particular. And so we're trying to think really strategically about how do we monitor air quality and understand where it's really poor or where there's opportunity for enhancement, and then do something about it, right? Because otherwise, not knowing isn't a rationale for not taking action for those kinds of things. So I just wanted to add that as well.
That's the difference between a sustainability expert and a climate scientist. But have you seen the ads? Have you heard the ads from Duluth and Buffalo?
Yes.
They're really going after this migration thing. It's really pretty funny, because you compare those places to here, and it's kind of funny.
We'll have one more question, then move on to the next tranche. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you very much for being here, and welcome back to Michigan and to the community. And thanks for stepping up to serve on the Environmental Commission. It's very exciting. You touched on a few topics, attracting talent, economies that are sustainable, like the Boston area or Silicon Valley. And you also touched on pollution and greenhouse gas emissions produced by car transportation. I'm going to try to ask an open-ended question in response. What's the intersection with housing policy?
What's the intersection with housing policy?
Yeah. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well as attracting new talent.
Well, the big thing I think we have to do is figure out how to make low or no carbon structures. One of the things I've been pushing hard with our commission, Missy and I are on campus, is let's, as soon as we can on campus, build a no carbon building. We build a lot of things. We just cannot build buildings anymore if they're going to create a bigger carbon footprint. So that's one thing. Of course, you've got an amazing amount of buildings that are old in this part of the world as well as others, and we have to figure out how to retrofit things as much as we can for energy savings. And the beautiful thing about that is not only do you help your carbon footprint, but you also going to help economically. So there's an economic justice issue here embedded in this. It's easy for me to pay my energy bills, but I don't think it's so easy for folks in Flint and some folks in Detroit and even some folks in Washtenaw, because it's a much bigger portion of their budget. So we have to figure out ways that are kind of triple bottom line, that help on multiple fronts. There is a big debate, I guess, and I'm not the expert on this, about whether we go with infilling or sprawl. When I was down in Tucson, we were really trying to move towards more infilling rather than sprawling out into the desert, because we're trying to preserve those pristine environments that still exist down there. And I would say that's something to really take seriously too. But it's really about how can we have a smaller carbon footprint? How can we lower the cost of energy and heating for people who live in our community? I think those are the big things.
Thank you.
Did I miss something? She knows more about this than I do.
No, it's good. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I
Absolutely, double.
appreciate
Thank you so
all.
much.
Yeah.
Very grateful.
Pleasure.
You are pretty fine, sir. So I'm going to actually skip through some of the other slides that I had, because I was going to tie it back to Ann Arbor, but I think that, as you know, Dina Peck did a fabulous job. So these are in your packet to have, and I want to save time. This is just closing out to say everything that we care about is directly or indirectly impacted by climate change, be that public health, our roads, the quality of our roads, our economy, our infrastructure, our water, the quality of our water, and you heard about that. So there's some quotes in here from the 2018 National Climate Assessment that just kind of make this more visceral. I'm going to just point out a few things on this slide, so when you go back, if you want to reference it, you have this in your pocket. On the far right side, under the economy, these are projections annually of what it's going to cost our economy to different climate impacts, right? So for example, you can see 141 billion a year from heat-related impacts by the end of this century. Heat is the #1 killer. It's a silent killer, but it is the thing when you look across all impacts, weather impacts, heat's the #1 taker of lives. So this is just something to kind of keep in mind. We're not immune. Our economy is not immune. Of course, our infrastructure isn't immune. This is from Michigan. A report that Senator Peters commissioned that came out last week, I think it might be 2 weeks ago now, found that Michigan is projected to have the second highest cost to infrastructure from climate change. And part of that's because our infrastructure is old. It's outdated. It's already vulnerable. And we have more flooding, as you heard, and that's just going to eat away at that infrastructure. Plus, freeze-thaw cycles are changing. And freeze-thaw cycles open up potholes. So I know that we care a lot, and our community cares a lot about the quality of our roads. But we haven't seen anything yet to what's coming down the pipeline. And then, of course, health. And there's so much research about health, because at the end of the day, this is about people. The one thing I wanted to tell you that's emerging right now that terrifies me is the mental health ramifications, the research on it to youth, to young people who right now feel like their future is being stripped away from them and that they have no voice. And this is the thing that breaks me, and I will not cry, but this is the research coming out right now that is just exhausting to be someone in this field, to read and realize that that's sort of happening. So there's a bunch of work, and I'm not going to depress you all too much with it. This is just to transition a little bit more to what we've had in Ann Arbor. I'm going to give you a handout that's got this, so you can take it away. But this gets at what has already happened in terms of changes in temperature, changes in precipitation, extremes, and how cold days are actually declining, and then what's projected to happen here in Ann Arbor. So we developed this in partnership with the University of Michigan. And then this just touches on, I know you all have seen this, but the fact that climate change is not an equal opportunity impactor. It's going to impact the most vulnerable. And while we are a wonderful place to live and we get all kinds of accolades, for my last count, I found 28 national awards that we've won, like the #1 most educated city in America. The other side is that we do have inequalities that exist in our community, and climate change is going to exacerbate those. And so this is just, I know you know this is just something for reference for you. Has anyone seen this before? This is from Hurricane Harvey. So these are folks in a low-income senior center waiting to be rescued, waiting in about 3 feet of standing water. So I put that up there because none of us want that. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen here, but it gets to the point that the most vulnerable are impacted the hardest by what happens. And then this last set of slides, again, just kind of for your back pocket, gets at the idea that we have direct impacts from climate change and natural disasters, and we have indirect, things that cascade through our system. So these are things that we may not feel every day, like impacts to local food or impacts to water quality, but they're real. Especially from the water perspective, with that much more rain falling in extreme events, that's that much more water, both upstream and at our location, that's inundating our systems. That's got ecosystem impacts. That's got impacts, obviously, for the quality of our water. Recreational impacts. You know, if the river's too rushy, we don't want people on it. That's not safe. So there's lots of impacts that kind of cascade through our system. This, I'm not going to play, but this gets at, Councilmember Nelson, your point. This is from Popular Science. They actually did a piece where they took climate impacts from around the nation and laid them on the map. And you can watch it. It's 1 minute and 30 seconds. It's a little cheeky. If you guys want to watch it at the end, I'm happy to. But this is the output. Looks like we're all moving to Michigan, right? Because when you overlay, have you seen it? Oh, yeah. It's been on for. I think it came out in 2016. Yeah, it's been out for a little while. But it just is an easy way to kind of summarize everything that Peck shared with us. There's a reason people are projecting this region is going to have an influx of people, and this kind of just graphically shows that. So. Lastly, there was a report that came out that many of you actually told me that you read, which makes me just so honored to work in a community like this. But the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out with their 1.5-degree report, which basically said, what do we need to do to make sure that we avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change? The answer? We have to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030. The kids in this picture will be 15 years old in 2030. This is what this means to me, and why the passion of our team and the passion of so many people in the city and those around the nation doing this work is kind of coming to a head at this point. We're starting to feel this really viscerally, and I know you do too. And the good news is we've actually got a phenomenal foundation to build upon. And so I'm excited to kind of pivot to a little bit of that part of the discussion and no more depression, kind of turn it around. So before I do that, any burning questions? Okay. Onward we will go. So let's start with where we've been. It's impossible to read this. You're going to get it in a second, and the surprise thing I'm going to hand you. But this is just a recognition that Ann Arbor, the environmentalism in Ann Arbor is based on a very, very long, robust trajectory. This doesn't go as far back as it even should. But it starts in 1981 when the Energy Advisory Board was formed and the city created its first energy plan. That's amazing. All the way to 1997 when the city joined a movement called ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, which actually meant to bring the voice of local governments front and center in international negotiations where they were figuring out what to do about climate change, and not a single local was represented. And Ann Arbor was one of a handful of municipalities that said absolutely not. You cannot figure this out without understanding the needs and the voices of local governments. That's vanguard, right? And that movement now represents, I think, a quarter of the world population is part of that. And Ann Arbor was at the front line helping make that happen. We were a Solar America city in 2007. In 2010, we won a number of awards, including Excellence in Urban Forestry, right? So this spans lots of topics and lots of issues. We have, thanks to council, in 2013, you adopted the sustainability framework and made that an element of the city's master plan so that everyone in the city should be thinking about sustainability in the work that they do. And that is a huge torch that we are picking up and trying to think about how to truly institutionalize in all of the decisions that are being made throughout the city. And then, of course, just last year, not even a year ago, you formed the Office of Sustainability and Innovations to elevate this work and make sure that these issues are truly prioritized in the work that we do, and that people have to justify decisions based on these principles. And if they don't, I can go knock on their doors and harass them, and I do, as Howard knows, which is great. And then, of course, underlying this are goals that you can't read on this image, but you have passed some wonderful, aggressive climate targets. I will say they're not aggressive enough anymore based on the science, but a 25% reduction by 2025, a 90% reduction by 2050. A one community target, making sure that we bring racial equity into all of the work that we do. Those things are guiding me, as well as, I'm sorry, I forgot this one, 100% of municipal operations have to be powered with clean and renewable energy by 2035, because we better be leading, right, as a municipal government if we're asking others to do this. We take those very seriously, and so that's what I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing since we've been formed. So I've been with the city 10 months. In 3 days, it will be officially 10 months. And so I have just a few things that's a lie. There's not a few. It's not true. There's 30 things I'm going to walk you through. I'm not going to make you bear all of them. But there are a number of things that we have been working on in that time that we don't do a great job of telling you about. So I took this as an opportunity to tell you about them, and then I actually want your feedback on how you want to hear about these kinds of things going forward. We're committing to at least a quarterly update to council in written format, but if there's some other way you want to know about this, let us know. Sometimes we get so busy doing work that we don't do a very good job of telling you what we're working on. And for that, I have to take credit and apologize. So the first two things on this list that we want to share with you are the green fleets work. So we have a policy to make sure that we're electrifying as much of our fleet as we can and reducing the footprint of that fleet, in particular the greenhouse gas emissions and the criteria air pollutants that come out of our tailpipe. So when I started with the city, that group was a little bit stagnant, and so we took over and decided to start organizing them. We've asked all operators of fleet to justify their vehicles. We're trying to right size, because that's the first thing, make sure we're actually using the right fleet for the right job, and if we have extra vehicles, jettison them, because that saves money. And then figuring out, can we electrify that fleet? Is there a hybrid alternative? Is there something else that's viable? So we've been working on that. As you know, we've purchased the city's, in partnership with Fleet, first 3 electric vehicles that are now here, and maybe we'll do a reception with you after if you'd like to go see one of them in the lot. So we're excited about that, and we continue to put kind of pressure on folks as they're buying vehicles. They have to actually justify to us why they need to buy what they need to buy. And thanks to the city administrator, we do actually get to have the final say on whether or not that's truly viable as a technology or whether or not something else is better on the market. We completed a program from the U.S. Department of Energy that we called the Solar Faithful program, and this program was about helping houses of worship throughout the city figure out how to finance solar. So it was looking at innovative financing models. We did such a good job on this project that we are a finalist for a federal grant. We will know hopefully soon as to whether or not we win that, but the idea is to pivot this grant and help all nonprofits in the community do this similarly. So this is how are we helping people kind of outside of our walls do this work. We launched a monthly sustainability lunch and learn that's in this room once a month for all city staff. It brings together a diversity of people to share their experiences, to learn about a wide array of topics on sustainability in a safe place, to network with each other, to share their ideas, and for us to get their feedback too as we continue to grow. Because if we're going to get that culture change, we've got to start in-house as well. And then the next two are community-facing events. The sustainability forums this year, we concluded our 8th annual sustainability forum series. We averaged 85 people from the community at those events. Our high was 115, which is not awful. And then the solar power hours, these have been going on for a number of years, but this year took a really different turn. Is anyone, just by a show of hands, familiar with net metering and what that is? Okay. So basically what happened is, right now, previously, if you would have installed solar on your roof, you would have paid in through electric every time you drew from the grid at roughly 11 cents. And every time you were over generating, because it's really, really bright, you would get paid 11 cents. So it just sort of worked out. Our utility said, no, we don't really like that, so we're going to challenge those rates. And the Public Service Commission agreed, and so they have rolled back the rate. So you will still pay 11 cents, and actually you will pay more because they passed a rate increase. But you will only get 7 cents back. So the economics of solar changed. So we knew this was coming, and we ran hard and fast at community engagement to try to get as many people onto solar that wanted to go as possible. We brought financiers, we brought installers together, we brought their neighbors who had installed solar to help answer questions. And right now we're working with the installers to figure out how much we moved the market. But one installer, 24 hours after one event, we did 3 of them, told us his company had over $200,000 worth of business just from that night. That was one installer of 4 at one of 3 events. So we're going to come back to you as soon as we get the numbers to understand how much solar that actually translated in our community to being installed on local roofs. But that mattered. That actually mattered for some people. And then lastly on this slide, we've been working, sustainability is big, so we have an environmentally preferable purchasing policy, and we've opened that back up. And just this afternoon, we forwarded it on. We think we're pretty close to finalizing it, where this policy talks about toxins. No one should be exposed to toxins in the workplace. We shouldn't have any single-use plastic in City Hall. We should be using 100% post-consumer paper. So this is a big, big policy that we've been drafting with our colleagues at the Ecology Center, and we've actually also been asked to do a number of national talks on this policy because of its breadth and its depth. So we're really excited about this policy, and it may not seem super sexy, but these are the kinds of things that actually can change how we move the market, right, with what we buy. So I'm sure you're sick of hearing me talk, so I'm going to pause for a second and actually bring up a partner to tell you about something else that we're working on. So Ms. Jennifer Hall, would you please come up? I wanted to just highlight a little bit about our partnership with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission because of the priority it is for the community.
Good evening. I'm not a climate change expert, but I am an expert at managing affordable housing. One of my biggest concerns is related to things that happen due to climate change. We already have a couple properties that we have flooding due to where it's located near the river. I'm very concerned about when we have power outages. We have a lot of people who are on medications. We have people who are in wheelchairs. So I'm concerned about making sure that we have power if there's ever a power outage at some of our sites. The biggest challenge we have really is in our operations of our property. We can project our costs for staff. We can project our costs for buying materials. The thing that fluctuates the most is energy. And so we don't have control over what happens in the marketplace. So one of the things that we have been working very closely with the Sustainability Department is to make sure that we are adding energy efficient products when we do new development as well as when we do renovations. There's this natural tension when we apply for funding. There's very much pressure from our funders to keep our costs low. Keeping your costs low can be anti putting in green initiatives or putting in more durable materials. So having the expertise of staff at the city who can work with us and talk to our contractors and be that expert and that technical advice on how long it will take to get your payback from whatever you're installing. That has been really, really critical for us. Specifically, we're working right now at, this is a Broadway Terrace, and it's an older building. And so these are some of the things that we are doing at this site right now. If you drive by, you'll see that there's some construction going on. We are also working on incorporating some additional and new energy efficiency upgrades at our new projects at Swift Lane, which is on Platt Road, as well as White State and Henry. These are things that we probably would not, actually I shouldn't say probably, we would not have done. We just wouldn't have done them if it wasn't for our partnership with the Sustainability Office. They've approached us not only on doing various renovations at our properties, but we've also talked to them about things that they're aware of going on nationally, funds that they are aware of, things that are happening that I don't look into because I'm always looking at housing ideas, and one of which is looking at trying to put electric cars at our housing sites, because that's also another problem, that not all of our tenants have access to vehicles, especially if they take the bus and they need to get groceries. If you go to some of our sites, you'll see piles and piles of grocery carts that people cart down the hall, down the sidewalk, and that's their main way of getting their groceries. So we have a lot of needs. We don't have a lot of expertise in this area, and we can't afford to pay somebody $180 or $200 an hour as a consultant. So it's very helpful for us to have people on staff that we know we can contact, or who can make us aware of things that we can access funding, or projects that we can make better. Thank you.
And then Chief Kennedy couldn't be here tonight, but I think there's a letter in your packet as well. We've been partnering pretty closely with the fire department on a number of initiatives, and I'll just pull out a few here. One is we were approached by students at the University of Michigan as part of their clean energy group, and they wanted to do a solar installation, but we're having a lot of trouble finding a place on campus to do that. And so they came, and I think we're just hoping to have a friendly ear. And what happened is I was like, I've got a roof for you, and we sat in the room and we called Chief Kennedy, and I was like, hey, you want to do solar on a fire station? And he was like, oh boy, Missy. Yeah, let's do that. And he said yes. And through that process, actually, we have unlocked a number of partnerships. We are working with him now on energy efficiency at Fire Station 6. We are running the city's first volunteer solar installation at that site through the students. This is really driven by them and their need to understand how installations actually work, the viability of those. We are helping him do site assessments of all of the things his officers are purchasing to understand where toxins might be in those, because we certainly don't want our frontline responders inhaling any sort of toxic materials. So we're helping them review their purchasing and find where alternatives exist. And we've helped with the fire station master plan. And then we know we'll be doing more. He's asked me to look for an electric fire truck, right, and see when they become viable and what kind of funding might be available for those initiatives. So he's been a really wonderful partner, and I think it, to me, demonstrates, both him and Jennifer, the opportunities and the responsibility that our office has to work with everyone to make sure that we meet them where they are in the city, because they're experts in their own individual areas of operation, and how we help integrate sustainability into their thinking and then push them forward, kind of being, in some cases, an internal consulting team that can help them around sustainability. So that's just two of the things I wanted to highlight in terms of partnerships. I'll move through the rest of these, excuse me, pretty quickly. I too have asthma and I'm getting a cold, so it's real. We are working on community-wide electric vehicle readiness, and there's a subcommittee that's working on this, and we've started to work with the city's lawyers on how we can help make sure that we're ready for what we hope will be an EV revolution that comes. We're working on home energy disclosure. We've got a working group that's formed of our Energy Commission. We have a work plan, which you will see in a minute. We hired an equity advisor to look at that, because equity is essential to the work that we do. So I want you to know that that's a value that we hold really deeply, is that we want to be thinking about our frontline and most vulnerable populations front and center. So we've got an analysis of the work that we're trying to do to make sure we miss any pitfalls, that we change where we need to change, and that we enhance things that are working well. So some of this, in terms of the budget, you'll see we've mostly applied for grants to bring on things like a senior citizen that's an equity fellow for our aging in place work, because I don't know what it's like to age in a place. So I need someone who actually does know that. So those are just some of the examples of how we're really trying to manifest this work. We are working with IT on a visualization tool so people can actually understand what climate impacts mean to them, as well as socioeconomic demographics of our city, because not every neighborhood looks the same. We are going to be launching in, I think, a few weeks, the first community, or CSA, community-supported agriculture here for city employees, where city employees will actually get to pick up their vegetables from the farmer's market directly. Again, thinking about food and local agricultural production. And then I'm going to pivot now and tell you a little bit about the Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grant program. As of Friday afternoon, we are broke. We have now granted out $100,000 to our community. And I cannot tell you the last two because we don't have signed paperwork yet, but they're very exciting. So those programs are wide-ranging, and we know that there are others in the hopper. So anyone that is interested and is listening right now to this grant program, you can still apply. You will be first for consideration July 1st, assuming we have a budget to run this program. So what we've funded, I think you know about a solar education curriculum, K through 12 curriculum at Ann Arbor STEAM, that actually the students are co-fundraising to install solar at the end of that program and then to monitor it, which is kind of cool and neat. There are two nature-based playgrounds, one at Leslie Science and Nature Center and another at an elementary school. We, in both of those cases, are very small. They're using this kind of as a jumping point for their fundraising, so the matches are extraordinary. Now, for one of these, the playground costs about $300,000, of which we're financing 10. So it feels kind of great to actually have that kind of a match to these programs. We have a program that's a holistic environmental curriculum, so not just solar, but teaching students about green infrastructure and teaching them about local food production and water retention and a whole bunch of other elements. We have funded the Neutral Zone to develop a youth job training program for 18-year-olds that are still at risk and aren't really ready to go to the market. This program is the one that I'm excited about all of these, but this has incredible potential. They have secured a match from Washtenaw Community College for this program, that if students make it through the program, they'll actually get free education at Washtenaw Community College. So that's pretty exciting. We have a program to repurpose old bicycles and to give them to folks in need throughout our community. And then we are expanding a farmer's market at Cobblestone to help them really develop a business plan and become super viable and expand local food access throughout the entire city. And then there's a community-built playscape where citizens are actually coming together to build a playground, and we help give them their seed grant. So lots is happening, and there are lots more great ideas in the community, but I just wanted you to know that this was a goal that I had to actually spend down this money by 2020, and I'm excited to say that we've hit that. So it's really good to hear. Next to last slide then, just a few other things. We finished 2 weeks ago filing paperwork to put solar on 13 city facilities, because we need to lead by example. And this gets back to that story about DTE and those rate changes. By filling this paperwork, we're grandfathered in to that good rate, that same in, same out rate. So we are then working a little bit further down. We hope to launch this shortly, an RFP to actually install the solar on those facilities and to help us figure out the financing. There's lots of technical reasons, and I'm happy to talk about why we think it should be financed. Basic gist is we don't pay taxes. There's a 30% tax incentive out there, and it would be silly to leave that on the table. So we want people to at least come to us with financial offers to figure out how we can get the best deal for solar possible. Similarly, we are launching an RFP on energy efficiency, and this builds from an experience that happened before my time where there was an RFP for energy audits that was done. And we learned a lot through that process. And what we're saying now is we actually want to disentangle an energy efficiency RFP. We want to give a small award to someone to identify lots of energy efficiency opportunities, but no tie that they'll be the ones to actually implement them. Then we'd like to do a second RFP for people actually to do the work and tie in local job creation as part of that. So we're actually building the market for the kind of labor we want to be creating throughout the entire community. We are helping launch a 100th anniversary farm-to-table dinner at the farmers market. We'll be hearing more about that soon because it is the 100th anniversary of the farmers market. Excuse me. And then we're looking to expand our landfill gas capture system to buy us a little bit of time. And there's a whole bunch of rationale behind what we're doing there. And then I just am noticing I didn't say 19. Our Resilience Hub outreach. We're focused on the southeast portion of the city, and that has started in earnest. Really understanding the Bryant and Mitchell neighborhoods is where we're focusing, and what the community sees as the strengths of those neighborhoods, and then the opportunities to enhance resilience. So lastly, fundraising on here, I just want to transition. We did not have a big budget this year minus staff support, so we're not foolish to think that even if we get our full budget, that's enough to do all of the things that need to get done, given the science. So we continue to fundraise. We have successfully won a number of grants highlighted here. The National League of Cities Resilience Grant is the one I was talking about migration, to understand what could it even look like having people come into this region. We have, I'm sorry, these are a little hard to read. We want to grant a number of learning exchanges, and this is offered through a network we're part of. where we get together with our peers in an intensive format and really talk about topics, how they're doing it, how we're doing it, how we can co-fundraise, learn from each other and not trip on the same flaws or mistakes that other people experienced, or just over jump kind of successes, so we can just kind of move on to what's next. So we've won one of those on resilience hubs, green rental housing, and then low-income EV car share programs. And then we also, these two, the NOAA ones, that's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Those are grants that I brought with me when I came to the city, and those are focused, one on stormwater and how we can enhance the resilience of our stormwater system both here and throughout the Great Lakes region. And then the other is looking at how, it's a wonky term, but how we actually co-produce knowledge with folks. So we often, coming from the world where I was, we have a lot of really, really smart people who think a lot about these issues and come up with ideas and then present them to us and say, use this. This is a great idea. But that is often void of context or the challenges we're actually facing. And so this grant is how do you actually co-produce information with end users in a way that makes it useful and usable to both parties and acknowledges that there are different value systems that we all operate in. And then we won a grant to do that equity scan of our program I mentioned before. We also have a number of grants that are still out that we're waiting to hear about. The two on the top are both for the same program, but it's a match. It's called Aging in Place Efficiently, and it's a match from a program of Partners for Places and then the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation. This is a program you'll hear about in a minute. We also applied for some more resources for climate migration analysis, and we heard today that we're being asked to submit a full proposal on that. That DOE program I told you about expanding to nonprofits, so we're waiting to hear if we won that. And then we've got this volunteer solar campaign that's out there. And I'm sure there'll be more, so if you know more things, keep them coming. And in addition, we're also engaging the next generation. So this isn't fundraising in the traditional sense, but this is capacity that we're leveraging because there is a lot of interest and passion in this. So these are just some of the student projects that we have live right now. We've got two projects actually focused on resilience hubs, one with master students and one with undergraduate students. We are working on an internal carbon pricing project that is in this work plan. And the idea there is how do we actually value carbon emissions in a way that changes behavior? So they're helping us kind of explore it, and we've been working with Tom Crawford and many others to really think about what that would mean for the city if our operations actually did put a price on carbon. We've got a project to envision a sustainable Ann Arbor. We launched that last Monday. That's really engaging with the community to understand their values and their ideas of what a sustainable Ann Arbor looks like. And then we also are working on welcome packets. So I don't know if anyone knew this, like in Superior Township, our friend just moved there. When they moved there, they got this packet of all these great things about Superior Township. We don't do that, and I would like to do that, and I would like there, yeah, we should be doing that, right? And I would like there to be information about energy opportunities and water opportunities and how to engage with your neighbors. And so we're working with students to start the first stream of that around energy. And then green rental housing. We've got a project really helping us think about how we meet our rental population where they are and help them live in more efficient places because there's a split incentive. They're never going to invest $10,000 in energy efficiency improvements in their place because they don't own it. And the landlord may not too. So we're trying to tackle that. And you'll see more of that in just a second. And so the very last thing in this section, and then we'll move on, is I think you've heard us say this before, but this work is bigger than Ann Arbor. I think we have a responsibility to take action here, but we also are listening to what our peers are doing and exporting ideas out, right? Because this really is a global problem. And so these are just some of the ways that we're helping kind of do service and build our knowledge base and build the movement outside of Ann Arbor. So I am on the Carbon Neutrality Commission, as Peck mentioned. I was recently appointed to the county's Environmental Council to help kind of coordinate across the region. I was just appointed to the Sierra Club's National Task Force on Climate Adaptation, so figuring out how as a nation we're actually going to prepare and what recommendations Sierra Clubs, the chapters around the nation should be thinking about as it comes to preparedness. So I'll be working very closely with our local chapter on that. I am the newly minted president of the American Society of Adaptation Professionals, so the board there, which is my professional society, is where I come from. We serve on Michigan Municipal League's Energy and Environment Committee because, of course, we need to be in touch with state policy. And then we are actually serving, believe it or not, on American Society of Civil Engineers Sustainability Working Group, helping write the code for sustainability engineers around kind of climate and sustainable action broadly. So we take that really, really seriously, and it's allowing us to get insight into where the field is going and how we can be receptive to those different practices. That's where we are. I'm excited to talk about where we're going, but before I do that, I just wanted to see if anyone had burning questions. All right, then I'm going to give you something. Oh, was there one?
Councilor Lum.
And my questions are mostly, first, thanks for coming tonight, and for, done a lot of work in developing, and is this the 84-pager that
What?
was?
What are you talking about? Yes, it is.
Okay, so maybe it's, my questions are addressed in this document. I mean, you've developed, an actionable framework with metrics and, to assess progress and results, which is excellent. So my questions are mostly about the green rental housing program. And I
Yes.
did submit some budget questions about this, and also the home energy disclosure program. Thank you for your responses. So I can wait until the end to ask those questions if you prefer?
Sure.
Okay, the administrator's nodding yes, so
Okay.
I'll bring up those questions at the end.
Great, and I will just make a note to make sure we get them. Okay, so this gets to where we're going, and what you've got in front of you is something that we've actually been working on for months. I'm sorry it didn't come out sooner. We underestimated the amount of time it was going to need to be in design, so that's our, I'll totally take the hit on that one. This is our 5-year work plan. Now, everything in this document, we do not start July 1st. Many of these things have already started. Many of these things will start in future years. But this is kind of the collective idea of where we're headed, and it's based on really 3 things. 1, council's goal of a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. And I will tell you that we actually tried to exceed that because of what the science says. So we are aiming for a 35% reduction through this work plan in that time period. It's also based on a whole lot of listening over a lot of years about community values. And so what you see in the graphic are just co-benefits. And if you wanted to take a look in the actual document, this is labeled draft, and I say that intentionally because there's no way I expect you to have many comments on this, so we'll iterate with you over it. But on page 9, you can also see this graphic that talks about the co-benefits that we constantly hear from the community, things that matter broadly. And then, of course, it's based on the science and what our peers are doing and what's proven viable and what we can take and run with now because we have the skills and the capacity to do, or what we've been working on over the last 10 months to build the skills and capacity to do. So with that, if you turn, there's an executive summary that's very colorful, and this just gives you the kind of lay of land. It's on page 16 and 17. And this walks through all of those strategies. I know you've seen an earlier iteration of this. We collapsed it a little bit for you. So following this, every single page, every single action in here will have a separate page that unpacks how we got to these numbers, and then the metrics that we're going to track. And we are committing, because it's the right thing to do, to come at least biannually, potentially even more frequently if you want, and to report on how we're doing. I want to put a pin in this and say, we think these are good actions. I can almost guarantee some of them won't work. And that's okay. Because our job is to do the best that we can with the actions, and if they don't work, to jettison them and tell you we're jettisoning them, and to try something else, right? Because the most important thing is that we have programs that align with our community values and that hit the targets that we're aspiring for, not that we're true just to the words on this page. And this comes from sort of my background. I think plans are directional, they're not scripture. So that's how I view this document, and I welcome feedback on that. So the way that I was going to walk through the rest of this is just talk about those things at a high level and leave it open for questions that are relevant to the budget for fiscal 20 or 21. And then we can talk anytime you want about anything else that's in there, but I felt like that was most pertinent given where we are in the budget cycle. So first I wanted to start with the Net Zero Energy Affordable Housing Program. So this program is in the housing section. You'll see it on page, I shouldn't have actually told you I would tell you the pages because I don't have them, 28. So for each of them, let me just walk you through this really quickly to familiarize you with what this looks like. So for each of them, they're a 2-page spread. On the left side, you'll see the description of the program, because why should you know what it means by its name? And then we've written a vision statement. So all of our staff had to sit around for quite a long time and really think about why. Why are we doing this? What does it look like when we're wildly successful in these programs? And so these are the vision statements that we've drafted. Under that, you see who's responsible for leading the initiative. Under that, you see all the partners that we think are essential to bring to the table, and that list will likely grow. Then you see the target demographic who we're really trying to hit. Sometimes it's the whole community, other times it's very focused, following a timeline. And then there's goals, or a goal in this case, indicators that we're tracking, cost information, and then on the following side, in the bubbles, you see the estimated greenhouse gas reduction potential, and we have all the calculations if anyone wants to get into how we got to these figures. You see then the co-benefits and then the benchmarks. So we've grouped the benchmarks into short-term, medium, and long-term because those are kind of our signals, our traffic signals to tell us if it's working or not. If we get to a medium-term target and we're excelling, it tells us something is working. If it's not, it tells us maybe it's time to shift or even jettison that particular program. So we thought it was really important to be super transparent with all of you about where we're headed. So this program, in the budget, we're asking for $200,000 to continue our partnership with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission. And here it's really focused on how do we get our affordable housing units to be net zero energy, and ideally over time net zero water, and maybe even net zero waste. So we're looking at doing that through the things like Jen mentioned, updating appliances to make them as efficient as possible, right? And helping cover that incremental difference where their budget doesn't cover it. Electrifying appliances, because as Peck said, natural gas isn't the way to go. We've got to electrify. Putting solar on the roof and getting batteries eventually on these sites. The batteries are what's proving the most expensive at the moment, so we're designing these facilities to be battery ready so that once the batteries are a little bit more cost effective, we can hook them up. The Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grant program, I know you all know about this. This is a budget request of $100,000 per year to continue giving grants out to our community. We have a panel of 5 that actually review every grant, and we rank them. We've got criteria so that we can evaluate everything that's coming in and make decisions that kind of align with the values that we hold for this program. So our goal going forward is to at least have 10 grants submitted in the next fiscal year and to have $100,000 allocated. Again, we've checked those boxes for this year, so we're pretty excited. Our operations need to be powered by that 100% clean and renewable goal that you've set for us. So this is broken out at the top on energy efficiency work that we're doing, renewable energy, electrification, revolving energy fund, which is something we operate in the city, and then of course those batteries and battery storage. So here we're requesting $170,000 and then a one-time $100,000 input into our revolving energy fund, which is how we actually can loan out money to other departments to do energy efficiency work if they don't have that built into their budgets, and then they pay us back through the energy savings. So that money continues to serve lots of different departments, but it's proven to be a pretty viable mechanism to help people get past that hurdle of, well, it costs too much, or I don't have it in the budget. We can come to them like we're doing with Chief Kennedy at Fire Station 6 and say, that's gonna cost roughly $30,000. I'm gonna loan it to you. We've done the calculation. You're gonna pay it back in 3.5 years. And we are setting up the systems with finance to get that back into the fund, just as an example. And here, you can see some of our goals and things we'll be tracking. While we're hoping to have solar on 13 facilities, we are at a minimum going to have solar on at least 5 city facilities. We're trying to pair those with the largest energy consumers, right, is where we want to go. Green rental housing, which I know we'll talk about in a moment. Here the idea is that split incentive and how we bridge it. 55% of our housing units in Ann Arbor are rental. And so that's a significant portion of our market where we don't really have a lot of opportunity to influence energy efficiency. But what we do have is a rental safety standard that people have to achieve in order to be able to rent. And so we've been working actually with the Rocky Mountain Institute to figure out how we can leverage that to ensure that we have minimum energy efficiency standards if you want to rent. And the idea here, so we've been doing a lot of the background research, kind of thinking about what's possible, what would be needed, what we hope to do in very, very short order, and I would love recommendations after if anyone has it, is to launch our landlord-tenant working group, because they have to actually be the ones to help us flesh out the nuance of this program. We now know it's legal, or it looks legal to do, so we've done those kinds of analyses, so we're not running at something that actually is not technically possible. And here, it's $25,000 almost exclusively for community engagement and a little bit of additional legal analysis once we actually have an ordinance that we may need to shop around. The next is a home energy disclosure, sometimes called time of marketing. You may have heard us talk about it in that way, so just a wonky term. What it effectively means is when you sell a house or buy a house, you know the energy intensity of that home. And that's particularly relevant because while we may be more affordable than Silicon Valley, we are still quite expensive as a community. And so many people looking to buy tend to go high in their range. And if they're buying something that is incredibly inefficient, they might actually be priced out when it comes to heating or cooling that particular home. So this program would work with our realtors, who we've already started to engage with, to make sure this is a piece of information that goes on the MLS when you list your home. And you could choose not to care about it when you're buying a home, but it's at least disclosed. And then we are building the support infrastructure around that, so that as people go to list or go to buy, we can help them access energy efficiency opportunities, or renewable energy opportunities, or financing, or whatever may be needed to make that unit much more efficient over time. So our goal here is really about disclosure. We've done some analysis of how many homes move within the market to figure out, if we pass this ordinance, how long it would take to get to penetration and really actually see the market move. We also have national numbers that show that more efficient homes sell for about 4.7% more than inefficient homes, which sort of makes sense. So we will be tracking home sales and see if those efficient homes actually are selling for more. Resilience hubs, I think you all know, is something I care deeply about. And so this is underway right now in the community design process, and we put in $87,000 for capital outlay to actually do the things the community is telling us they want to see in that hub. So I can't tell you today what that's going to look like, but I commit to telling you before we spend $1 what the community has designed that hub to make sure it's something you're comfortable with. I anticipate it will be things like solar and storage, because we want that place to be safe in case of a disaster. It might also be some programming support. It might need to be some stormwater features to make sure that that site obviously doesn't flood. There might need to be some car share opportunities there, but it'll be defined with the community, which is the process that we're actively in right now. So I want to come back, but I know that if we didn't put something in the budget, we would just continue to wait to fundraise for this. And we are, many of these have asterisks with them, and in the plan you can see that we're fundraising for these too. Rarely are we asking you for 100% of the budget. We are going to continue to use the money that council commits and leverage it to unlock other resources, because that's just smart to do if we can do it. A green business challenge. This is something we're actually looking to really focus on the planning phase of. Everything I've told you about so far, we have been actively in design phase for the last few months. This is one where we haven't been, because we've been a little bit busy in our office. And so this is something we look to start next year with a board of advisors that are business owners, helping us really understand what do we want an Ann Arbor specific green business challenge to look like. This is about incentivizing and recognizing our businesses for the really great work that they're doing to help us meet our sustainability goals and objectives. And so again, I can't tell you what it will look like, because it will be co-defined by those who will be a part of that system. Is this a useful level of knowledge? I'm trying to go fast, but you have questions, but I just want to make sure. Okay. All right. Next is our Aging in Place Efficiently program. Again, I know you all have heard of these. This is the idea that we are aging across Michigan, especially across southeastern Michigan. And we know that you have better health outcomes when you age in a place of your choosing, right? And that's often your home, but it could be anywhere. We are really concerned with our low-income seniors not having the option of aging in the place of their choosing. And so we partnered with a number of different social organizations that are really focused on aging in place. And we've said, we don't have expertise in social work, but we have expertise in energy efficiency. So what if we target our low-income seniors and actually come in while you're doing replacements within their home to help them stay there longer, like grab bars or hydraulic lifts, so that wheelchair can get underneath a counter and they can still cook. What if we come in and do energy efficiency improvements? And what if we can help reduce their energy bill by 15 or 20%? That's that much more money that they now have to invest in medicine or transit or doctor's visits or whatever it might be that's not being spent on energy bills. So this is one that we have applied mostly for national funding for. And here we're actually only asking for $5,600 just to do some of the additional outreach and engagement materials that we didn't ask for in our other budget. So this is really kind of bringing together these stakeholders to design this program. Weatherization expansion is another one that's very, very, very much grounded in equity. So as you probably know, weatherization services are only available within the county to people at a certain federal poverty level. And we have a lot of people who are just over that level. So we've been talking to the county about how we can help expand the number of people that are able to access those particular resources. And so here what we're doing in partnership with the county and actually with an equity intern that we got from the summer. I didn't put this in there. She won a grant from the University of Michigan to work with us, so some more free labor is going to help us design this program in partnership with the county and in partnership with some of our low-income residents who need weatherization services. So these are services that basically come in and help you tighten your home so you're not heating the outdoors or cooling the outdoors. Your resources are really focused on you and your needs. So our goal is to design this program and then to have 12 low-income homes be weatherized through this, not through the existing county services, but through these additional services that we're unlocking by the end of the next fiscal year. And then this one is a big one for its potential. This is, I'm going to guess, all of you feel slightly overwhelmed, because I feel slightly overwhelmed working in this. There are so many things that you could do. There's so many resources out there, but where do you start? And who can help you with that? And how do you even apply for some of these things? And when can you apply for these things? So we've heard pretty loud and clear from our Energy Commission for quite a long time that they would like to have effectively a concierge service. I call it the bat phone sometimes. We could just pick up the bat phone and you could call someone and you could say, I want to do something, but I don't know what to do. And they can help you kind of navigate that landscape. So I'm very excited to announce going to design this program and launch it. We think eventually this should be something that is nested within the county, but right now we have the capacity to do that. And we are starting to work with DTE, with consumers, with other partners throughout the community to make sure we get all of the information we need so we can quickly point people to the things that they need to do in their own homes, in their own lives, honestly, and to access the resources that are available to do this. We're not islands on our own, but we often feel like that. So how do we connect those islands so people get what they need to do the work that we all need them to do? So those are the programs I just ran through. I think we're going to leave a lot of time for questions. I just want to end with a few takeaways. We know that we are conducting an unprecedented experiment right now with our climate system. We have about a decade to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by half if we want to avoid the most significant impacts of climate change. But the good news is the choices we make today will have an impact, and people watch Ann Arbor. And it's not just about us. It's about what we can share with lots of other people. And people really do pay attention, and we are highly networked as a city, and we have the foundation to build from. We have the skills, we have the people, we have the passion. Now we just got to do it. And that's what I'm excited to talk to all of you about. So, let's go.
Councilor Lum.
Dr. Stoltz. So, while you were talking, then as I said, I didn't have a chance to go through this that we got,
Short
a couple
document.
hours ago, but there's a lot here. But again, my question's about the Green Rental Housing Program and the Home Energy Disclosure Program, so I flipped open to those pages. So as you can see from my budget question on the Green Rental Housing Program, my concern was, my initial takeaway was that rents would be frozen for 3 years, and then after the program was put in place, but your response clarified that rents would not be frozen, but that they would be tied to market rates, obviously a good thing, and increases, and that would be similar to the program that they adopted in Boulder. I will note, though, that I'm a little bit more confused because on your slide here,
On green rental?
your slide, it's slide 35, yeah. You indicated 3 years after the ordinance effective date, no net increase in rents, 3 years after the date, and then, I just looked at it, page 24, it says no net increase in average rents outside of normal market inflation 5 years past the policy adoption. So slide 23 says 3 years, this says 5.
Yeah, it's just to check in. Like at 3 years, we're going to check in and make sure that still holds true, and the goal is still within
Okay.
5 years. Yeah, it's a good question.
So tying, Ann Arbor rents to market rents and increases in communities that don't have a program like this suggests that the expectation is that property owners would have to, just absorb the costs and depending on how aggressive the energy efficiency requirements, improvements might be, the cost to the property owners could be pretty significant. And I'm wondering if the Boulder program that we're basing our program on provided any opportunity for property owners to, recoup the incremental costs. Did Boulder require immediate compliance, or was there a transition period of some kind?
Yeah, it was a phased install, which is what we're also looking to do as well, because it's tied, what we were thinking about is tying it to the rental inspections, which are already phased, because we couldn't do all of them in any given year, so that we would give advance notice, and then within a certain period of time, maybe 2 years, we would say, okay, you have 2 years until your next rental inspection to be in compliance, or 5 years, to be determined with our tenant and landlords. But I would say to your question, what we are doing as part of this program is not just saying, figure it out. right? We've actually worked with Michigan Saves on low interest and zero interest financing options for those landlords to actually do the retrofits and the renovations. And then we're bringing in our utility partners to offer incentives to help lower the cost of those retrofits. So we are not
To
going to leave
help
people
offset these
stranded.
incremental costs. these
That's right,
investment-
exactly,
okay.
yeah. So that's part of the program too, which makes it more complex, but also I think much more feasible.
Yeah, and then I liked when you said TBD, because, and you indicated in here, you list the collaborators, and I see Washington Area Apartment Association, so, so I'm assuming and just confirming here, that the plan is to engage, Ann Arbor apartment owners,
Oh,
the
yes.
association, in developing the standard and the ordinance.
Absolutely right.
Okay.
So this is where, if anyone has recommendations after, we're going to pull a panel of tenants and landlords together to help develop it.
Okay,
The
that's-
actual content.
That's great. Then my other question about the home energy disclosure program.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of my questions was whether or not this applied, again, this is before perceiving this, this would apply to duplexes, multifamily homes, you know, properties, sorry, and commercial properties, or just single-family homes, but I see you're talking about home energy
Yeah.
scores in here.
So
So
single-family.
it's just single-family homes, and then again, just in terms of stakeholder input, you know, and you stated that you're already started to work with the realtors. Because we have a tendency and to, on occasion, I'm not saying you, but to engage stakeholders, not on the front end, and, or the folks most impacted in drafting ordinances and things. And then, not surprisingly, there's often resistance when the final product is presented to folks. So I was encouraged by your response to my budget question, and in stating that you were planning on inviting the, you know, Ann Arbor Board of Realtors to serve on your committee, so that's good. And I will just say, just in general, my concern is in legislating, you know, things that businesses and private citizens must do, and I have, you know, in terms of programs for city facilities and recognizing businesses that are doing a good job in this regard, or helping to facilitate, educate, and support private efforts. You know, it's just a matter of how much, you know, you can spend, but I think that's fine. But my concern is telling folks what they have to do and passing ordinances to govern behaviors and choices. You know, it's kind of more the libertarian in me. I mean, that is, you know, legislating, making requirements, that's a concern to me. But all these other things, you know, creating programs where, you know, people, again, for our own energy efficiency and all of that, I think that's good. And so.
No, thank you for that. And I just wanted to say, I don't think this will alleviate
I'm
a lot of your
probably
stress.
not, there probably aren't
No,
others who.
Totally fine. And I think that's a real concern. And I just
It's
want to say,
just-
these ordinances that we're looking at don't tell you what you have to do.
Yeah.
Actually, we are leaving that completely to the discretion. So what we're talking about is setting a standard that says, you have to somehow get this energy score. It is up to you how. And so that's the sort of the happy middle ground that we sort of landed on, where there are lots, like, we might go into, let's say, a rental place, and someone can hit it with just caulking their windows.
Yeah, but right now, you know, I will just say that, I mean, I know what the intent is here, but just, again, here's a situation where we would be potentially requiring sellers of a single-family home to obtain and disclose a home energy score, and before they could sell their house, and, you know, that comes with a cost.
Absolutely.
And it's
Correct.
another level of government, you know, bureaucracy.
Yeah, we are not alone. I will say, this is one of those things that will not make you feel better.
Yeah.
But we have dozens and dozens of other cities who are moving in this direction too. That does not make you feel
Yeah,
better,
no,
because I think it's the
I'm-
core.
yeah.
but Just to share.
Doesn't make me.
I know it doesn't make you feel better, but yeah.
But thanks.
Yeah.
Councilmember Rumlowy.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor, and thank you, Councilmember Lum, for stating at least one of the concerns that I have. We have to be careful on how we come in on this, and, you know, a lot more carrot and a little less stick. And it's good that we're inviting, you know, the board of realtors and others to be involved in this inspection program when people go to sell their homes. Sometimes people got to sell a house under terrible circumstances, and, you know, they're taking a bath on it to begin with. So making it creating unintended hardship.
Sure.
You know, I just would hate to see that when someone's already forced to sell for under duress. And then, you know, it's just one of these things, and I'm sure you're thinking of it as well, is just, you know, the affordability index. And, you know, I understand, you know, this leak of energy affects disproportionately lower income folks, but also those lower income folks have fewer options. And just to have a roof over your head is a blessing. And so just making sure that we don't cause unintended consequences that make the unaffordable issue even worse than it is by further, you know, stipulations. So we just need to be very careful of the people that may be affected by increased regulations.
I just want to say that I appreciate that, and it is absolutely part of the task force job to think about those exact issues. So if you would like to join our task force, we would welcome your creative thinking about how we navigate.
There is that task force that I actually want to be on, and
Yeah.
that's the Green Business Challenge. That I would
That's good.
love
You
to be
already
on that
are,
when
'cause
it
that's
comes
good.
time to do something
Great.
there.
Yeah, we sort of have you on the short list for some reason.
I'll get you a
Yeah, yeah.
resume.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. I just want to maybe state the obvious, that as much as I respect Councilmember Lem's perspective, I disagree with it vehemently. You know, we brought you here to be disruptive, and I'm a believer in that one of the most effective ways to change individual and collective behaviors through policy change. And so, you know, sometimes it's by incentivizing, and sometimes it's not. And a lot of times it's not. You know, some of our most important changes that have led to healthy behaviors, and you know, the Clean Air Act was not a carrot, right? So so I think it's important that we do lead the way here, and I really do appreciate that mix of perspectives that's blended with an equity lens. Do we know when, I had a specific question, since it's in my ward, about the hubs, about the resilience, and when we're going to be starting with that, and hopefully we can be involved as council members in that process.
Absolutely. We are starting to ride the bus in those wards, in and out, and talk to people that are riding the bus, and we're starting to talk to people on the streets right now about kind of what the strength, we're framing this as more of a strength, like what are the strengths of these neighborhoods, and then that becomes a gateway of like opportunities for enhancement of these neighborhoods. So this is a multi-pronged process, and we would love to have you involved. We envision a lot of kind of guerrilla warfare, if you will, like on the ground, really talking and really listening at the beginning, and then taking what we hear, yeah, exactly, and kind of translating it, and then going to kind of bigger meetings where we give people their words back and say, did we hear you right? Is this really what you're talking about? And I think it would be phenomenal to have
Well, I'd love
council
to
representation there.
count myself
Got
in
it.
amongst the listeners, and yeah, really look forward to that, because I think any one of us at that table who's, you know, we've all done walking throughout the neighborhood campaigning, and we know a lot of the strengths of our neighborhoods, but really hearing from those community members themselves is so important. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I've got Councilmember Ackerman, Nelson, Bannister, and Griswold. Councilmember Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Stoltz. This is an incredible document, and I couldn't help but smile as I looked through it. And you definitely put the smart in smart goals. So thank you. I'll just say to not to belabor the point, but to give some encouragement and some wind on your sails. I'd say, you know, running government like a business, we're in the business of making rules. There are, you know, businesses that try to make every penny of profit, and companies that go to work every day trying to change the world, and that I'd rather, you know, be part of a rulemaking body that's trying to change the world, so keep at it. And then also with respect to the ways in which we can regulate the market, I think of something like stormwater as a set of regulations that we look towards. And stormwater obviously is a symptom of climate change. And we're very comfortable putting hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, of expected investment on the part of property owners with respect to stormwater. And I would love to see us, potentially look to the same level of investment to property owners to help curb the cause of those stormwater issues, not just the symptoms. Whatever task forces there are, whatever points of engagement there could be for members of this council as individuals, would you mind circulating a list?
Absolutely.
And so if there's one that speaks to us, maybe we can volunteer?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Nelson.
I just had a quick, yikes. I just had a quick question about the Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grants. I'm looking at the application and the categories of organizations or associations that are eligible to apply.
Online or in the document, just to make sure. Online.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I was just curious, based on the applications that you've granted so far, are you seeing, I mean, the list that when I look at it, it looks like a lot of educational organizations. Is that what it's looking like, that is dominating I mean, what do you imagine moving forward with Sustaining Ann Arbor Together grant based on what it's looking like right now? And
Sure. So I think they're actually different. I would answer that two ways. I would say what it looks like now and what I would like for it to look like. Yeah. So what it looks like right now, excuse me, about 50% are education institutions, which in some ways can make sense to me because the grant program is relatively new. We've been pushing it out and they're better organized to respond to grants. Going forward, though, it's intentional that we've been trying to get community groups to apply. It's like neighborhood associations and others are who I really want to start targeting much more with the grant program. That doesn't mean that our educational institutions aren't worthy of it, for sure. But I think it's just symptomatic of a new program, and those who are organized and ready to respond to it are those who respond to it quickly. And so we pretty much have approved everything that's come in so far because they're good programs. So it's not like we're turning down neighborhood associations that are applying for grants. But we would welcome help in getting the word out if you know about people who want to apply. And we do coach people. So almost all of the applications that are not education institutions, we coached through the process. So if you know someone who's eager and maybe there's a reason they haven't stepped up, we'd be happy to work with them, yeah.
so I guess my follow-up, I guess, you said that 50% are educational. What are the other 50% are what kind of organizations?
Nonprofits, community groups, yeah,
Okay.
that have applied for the programs. Mostly nonprofits, though. Yeah.
Councilmember Bannister.
I had two questions, and thanks you two, or three, for pulling all this together and your hard work these last several months on this. But I had two questions on two of my perennial favorite topics, trees and communications. Just on Friday, the United Nations News came out with a new article about trees being the lungs of the planet. And they went on to say that forests are the most cost-effective way to fight climate change, and that the biggest threat to our forests is our agriculture. And so I was just flipping through everything quick to see, have you had any chance amongst all these other wonderful programs to pay any special attention or programs for the trees, or what we should do with them, or
Yeah.
how to protect them better?
It's a great question, and I wish I could be super succinct because it's on lots of levels that we've been working on this. So one is, before our new city forester came in, we actually were working on a number of things with the previous city forester. So we're sort of in a restart, honestly, with the new forester. We are trying to prioritize tree planting. So we have a local carbon offset program, but we also plant 1,000 trees a year. And we're trying to make sure that's through the equity lens, that we're putting it in areas with poor air quality, areas that have low cover that could use it, areas that are flooding, so could have better stormwater retention. So we've been working to kind of infiltrate forestry that way, and they share those goals too. We're just trying to make it a little bit more pronounced. So that's one way we're trying to think. So there's the 1,000 trees that we've already committed to planting, and then we actually have a goal of 1,500 additional trees being planted throughout the city. So that's additional demand. And then we've been in conversation about how we can protect outside of the city, more of like the green belt or other areas that have really, really important ecosystem functions for us, but we haven't gotten very far down figuring out what we actually can do about that. So still being explored, it just, to me, wasn't baked enough to put in front of you at this time.
Okay.
Does that help a little bit?
Yes, and,
Okay.
and I am very interested in the going forward, that we do some more things to actually protect and identify and protect particularly our heritage trees, and just pay more attention to the benefit, if they are in fact our most cost-effective way to fight climate change going forward and in the lungs of the planet. I'd like to have that part of our program.
Thank you, and I just remembered on the spot too, of course, the Environmental Commission has the Natural Features Working Group that we're waiting to see the recommendations that come out from that group about protecting natural features and enhancing natural features within the city. And then I think that I might have an example of something. I'm happy to pass this around. We've been working on this design for our residents, which talks about like what they could actually do in their home and different features. And so the natural features element is what we're adding as well. So what they can do both from an energy perspective, efficiency or renewables, in terms of electrification, but also then in terms of stormwater retention and green infrastructure. So this is just a draft. We're still working on it, but I thought I'd pass that around.
I can keep that, or give it back?
Yes, you can pass it
This
around.
is
or keep
great,
it.
because this did come up I'm on that subcommittee, and we did talk about this very piece, I believe, Christopher Graham and the group of us. The other big question I had was about communications.
Yes.
Because I know Mr. Lazarus and I had met on this, and John Mursky and Councilmember Griswold and such, and not only do we want to tell our story to try to motivate other cities and other businesses, but we also want to influence residents on their lifestyle and diet choices, because even if the city does everything perfect, we're only 2% of our greenhouse gas inventory. So I'm glad to see you've got on page 13 and page 76, you are preparing the analysis of the greenhouse
Yes.
gas inventory. I'll look forward to when that gets finished. But I was wondering if any formal communications had been organized, coordinated across Lisa Wandrash's communications area and our recycle guides and through Recycle Ann Arbor and all the different pieces of communications that the city does. You'd mentioned, I saw as we flipped through the slide 39 had aging in place, like $5,600 for education and outreach. And then on slide 40 under weatherization, we'd said something there about targeting behavior change.
Yep.
And so I'm very interested in using positive communications to just illuminate for people what they could be doing wrong, if you will, that would help us lower our greenhouse gas inventories.
Yeah, we share that value for sure. So I should give a shout out to the communications intern who recently came on board. He actually designed this plan. So we do, Ms. Wandrash and I meet biweekly and try to coordinate our communications and efforts. And that includes just knowing about things like water to push out to our water working group within the Environmental Commission, but then also our needs and our asks around communications. So we have started kind of a broad process to coordinate more meaningfully. Really candidly, we're just building the infrastructure now to do that come the new fiscal year when we actually have resources to push and to point people towards things. The other thing I would say is we need to push information out, and we also have to get it back in, right? So one of the things that we have launched is a sustainability listening tour, really going out and understanding what people value about sustainability and value about our place. And then we are hiring, I hope, a graphic artist who will take all of the hundreds of ideas people gave us and design what an Ann Arbor looks like. But on the periphery, we're taking pictures of the people of Ann Arbor, right? Because a sustainable Ann Arbor, if we agree that's what we want to look like, is only as good as the people. So the vision is kind of nested in the people in that place. And so that's something that we can then point to and have as kind of a community talking point. So that gets to, we go and we share and we tell people how to achieve that vision, but we only can do that once we've listened to what their ideas of the vision are. So I just would say it's that two-way. And the
Okay.
greenhouse gas inventory, I just wanted to say quickly, I'm sorry you don't have those figures. We've been working on it for a very long time. If anyone has done a greenhouse gas inventory, you know you're pretty much dependent on others to give you data. And so we are waiting on the last piece of information. And I did not want to present something that I didn't have high confidence in. So it will be coming soon, but apologies for not having it today.
I have Griswold, Lum, Smith, and myself, if we could commit to everybody moving along in light of the time. Councilmember Griswold.
Moving along, yes. Congratulations on your first 10 months. Especially like to hear terms like partners and leveraging funds. I'm sitting over here very, very sad, and so I apologize if I've had a long face over here. But my one question is, how can we clone you?
Oh,
Because.
that's a good question.
Yeah, not to
where I thought
do
we were
your
gonna go.
work, though. We've adopted Vision Zero,
Right.
and we need a champion because we're spending more money and we're not getting the results. And last week, we had yet another critical pedestrian cyclist crash at an intersection where everyone knew it was a dangerous intersection, and we've talked about it, and it's MDOT. But we need, if we can be smart in terms of sustainability, we have to be smart in terms of Vision Zero. So, work on cloning.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Councilmember Lum.
Thanks, I'll be quick. So this is a follow-on to the back and forth about trees. And
yes.
I will just say that, and I notice that on page 54 of your 5-year plan, in terms of capital decision-making, you have your vision statement says that by 2022, every, I have a question mark there, I don't know, because honestly, just, I don't know, not all capital projects, I need to be educated, I guess, because I don't see how every capital project in the city relates to some climate change consideration, but that's for another day.
Sure.
But I will say that I don't think have done a great job of tying the urban tree management plan to our capital improvement plan. And I know this came up with the Gettys Ave project, where we took out a lot of trees as part of the stormwater management capital improvement, and the other related improvements there. We're putting in sanitary and sewer and water main, sidewalks, bike paths, and all of that. And then ultimately, the resurfacing of the road. But it did seem incongruous to the folks, in the area, myself included, who were, losing, I don't live on Gettys, but, so we had a lot of tree removal. And at the time, there were a couple residents who pointed out, hey, Jane, we have this, integrated urban tree management plan, or whatever it's called, integrated, maybe just urban tree management plan, and how does that tie to what we're doing here? Because it just seemed incongruous. So I think just going forward, I will just say, knowing what we know about what trees do for climate change, that we need to, take that into consideration when we're doing capital improvements as well.
Thank
So,
you.
Thanks.
Thank you for that suggestion.
Councilmember Smith.
So that's a great jumping off point for what I want to say about your 10 months here is you've put into place a tremendous amount of infrastructure that was missing here. And how do we have this conversation very broadly across departments with staff whose expertise is not sustainability and whose expertise is not climate science. And you've been able to, in a very short amount of time, push that ball forward more than we've been able to in many, many years. And I'm very appreciative of that, and brought a great deal of expertise to our city. The one thing I would hope that we can push up and prioritize is a local carbon offset program that you talk about. I don't know how many people who are familiar with the idea of a carbon offset, but people like me that commute and have to drive because we don't have regional transit, pay to offset our carbon emissions, and what we pay goes to fund projects that either capture carbon, sequester carbon, plant trees. All of those dollars I spend on that every year leave our community. Now, if we had projects like the tree planting, that's, the 1,500 trees that you talk about in a local carbon offset program, I think, that's something that would have immediate interest throughout the community, that that buying these offsets actually has a local impact. Because I feel a little bit like, I don't know where this goes, so I'm, funding methane capture system in Indiana. Great. It's good for the planet, but I'd like to see that in our own community and in our own backyard, and I think I speak for a lot of people across the city that if we can speed that up at all, I think that would be a roaring success here.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I guess I'd say, just to pontificate a little bit, to follow up on what's been said at the table, I think what we see here is and thank you to all presenters truly, is a plan, a work plan, a thoughtful work plan that has a tremendous amount of potential, and I think hits a need that so many people in the community have been crying out for. We as a municipal organization have been able to do some, but we've striven to do more, but not quite had the internal infrastructure to do it, and I think we now plainly and obviously do. I'm particularly for myself delighted that so much of this also is outward-looking. As has been stated, we're 2% of the local greenhouse gas load as a municipal organization, and our community takes up a lot. And I think us doing what we can to help them do what they want to do is exactly what we should be doing, and I'm delighted that you're doing it, so thank you. I'm delighted too about the entrepreneurial approach that we're taking. Let's see if it works. If it's along the way, if it's working, great, let's double it. If it's not working, let's move along. I'd like to see that there are metrics in the report and the work plan. I think that's outstanding. I would add, as taking communications recommendations from just some lawyer who managed to get elected. It might be dangerous work, but I would say I appreciate seeing the dollar amounts that the city is contributing to these programs, but also have in my cranky brain, that's going to cost way more than that. But I know it's going to cost way more than that, but it's going to be someone else's money because you're going to get grants or you already have partners in line. I'd love to see, this is what we're asking city to spend, this is what this program is going to take, and by the way, we have that in line already because our partners are in place. So although you may think $5,000 doesn't go very far when it comes to an energy efficiency program with respect to seniors, we're just one piece of the puzzle, but we're participating, and our participation is enough to incentivize the program to move forward. So thank you, everybody.
That's great. And it's a $3,000 or $300,000 grant, by the way.
This is
that one is
perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time clock. As a matter of courtesy, we may have only one person speaking at a time. And finally, if you require assistance in speaking before council, we'd be delighted to provide it to you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak at public comment?
Hello, my name is Vivian Chang. I'm currently the Vice Chair of the Human Rights Commission. I've served on that commission since September of 2016. I have heard recently that my term is set to expire on May 31st of this month, and I have been informed by the mayor that my name will not be submitted to the council, won't be forwarded to the council for consideration for a vote. As current Vice Chair of the Human Rights Commission, I very much appreciate the time that I've been able to spend working on human rights in Ann Arbor. I really valued being able to participate in the auditing firm search with Hillard Heinz, and also with all the work that the city has done with the police task force and the ICPOC. I don't believe that the work we've done has been completed, and I would very much like to continue to serve on the Human Rights Commission in my capacity as commissioner or vice chair. At the meeting that I led last week, I did receive the support of the Human Rights Commission, who, and the other members, indicated that they would like me to be, like my name to be resubmitted to the City Council for a vote. And so I just wanted to come to City Council and indicate my interest in continuing serving, and to also express the fact that I think my resume and my application, which I think is available to all of you, really demonstrates that I've been interested in human rights issues, I've been interested in identity issues and issues of intersectionality as, you know, queer woman of color. And as a child of immigrants, these are all issues I deeply care about. These are all issues that I think impact me, impact people who look like me, and impact the communities I want to serve and the communities I decided that I wanted to serve on a long-term basis when I went to the University of Michigan Law School in order to be a public defender. I think that this work is vitally important to me and to people in this community, and I do think that I speak for more than just myself when I call for more transparency in the process and for more transparency surrounding a lot of the issues that the community is interested in. And so I just wanted to come and reiterate my continued interest in serving in some capacity for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at public comment? Seeing no one, public comment is closed. We have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilmember Smith, second by Councilmember Umlawi. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.